Fantastic, thank you. Liam and I both work at CloudCannon. CloudCannon is a visual CMS for Eleventy and for other SSGs. And broadly speaking, we focus on two things. We want to make it easier for everyone to manage their content via Git and a visual editing interface, and on creating and supporting open source SSG agnostic tooling. It's really important to us too that there's absolutely no vendor locking in CloudCannon. We think your site, your source, and your content should be yours and stored in your Git repo. You can take it where you want. It's fully portable. Today, we're joining forces to talk about how CloudCannon has a feature called site mounting that can combine with a new open source tool that creates a static API. And that's aimed at allowing large organizations to receive the same benefits of static sites and a Git-based CMS as smaller single-site orgs. So site mounting, site mounting allows multiple sites to sync to one build image on CloudCannon. You might have seen this in action on Eleventy already. Zach made a video about it when the feature first launched last year. But today, in addition to sharing components and layout files between sites, we're also going to demonstrate a data lake for a group of connected sites, Eleventy sites, enabling content syndication and aggregation via Liam's new tool, FlatLake.
FlatLake is a new entry in the suite of open source tools we're developing at CloudCannon. Similar to the way a static site generator reads your content files and spits out static HTML files that can be served as a website, FlatLake reads those same content files and spits out static JSON files that can be queried as an API. Today, we'll show a workflow that uses FlatLake to aggregate and share content between standalone Eleventy sites.
So let's imagine, for example, that we're tasked with building several real good websites for quite a large organization. Today, we're going to demo 4 smaller sites connected to one larger parent site, but there's no technical limit here. So we'll call our larger site Real Big Company. You can check it out if you like. realbig.company is the website. It's all live. Look at the GitHub. It's all connected. We love static sites. We love flat files. We love Eleventy, and we love nice ways to edit Markdown files. So our smaller sites are static laboratories, planar files, Eleventy incorporated, and liminal interfaces. It's very on-brand. I had a lot of fun writing the copy for this. You can imagine a large corporation or a university perhaps needing a setup like this. So we're one team of content folk. They may or may not be non-technical. They will be managing several hundred sites. So I can jump into this right now. I'm editing on CloudCannon. This is an Eleventy site. I'm editing a Markdown live in the visual editor. And it's great, right? Like really good for a single site. I can edit everything really quickly. I can add page components that our developer has built. But what about a smaller site? What about our smaller sites? If we want to jump back to what the big corporation needs, what if they want to spin up a new site? They have quite a large wish list here. How do they get exactly the same page building components in each site? What about brand recognition for the real big corporate family? And perhaps more importantly, if we update a layout or a component, how can it be reflected on all of our sites? That's a pretty decent sized wish list. And of course, we want this on Eleventy for all of the performance benefits of a static site, and on CloudCannon for the benefits of a visual editor with our content stored in Git. Now, luckily, we can do all of this. We can see this in action here. This is XITY, Eleventy Incorporated, a subsidiary of Real Big Company. You can see here our site is retrieving the source files from the component library. That's the shared common repo. And layouts underneath that are mounted from the common repo into the site includes layouts folder. This is a pretty straightforward setup, just an option within CloudCannon to set up. And here's a simplified version where our site folder and our config files are sourced from our separate site's content repo, and component library and layouts are sourced from the central repo. And the important aspect is that from here, the Eleventy build proceeds as if all files were arranged in one folder originally, and thus are built as one unified static site. And once any files in the common repo are changed, a layout is tweaked perhaps, or a new page building component is added, any downstream linked sites have immediate access to the new editing components, and any layout changes will automatically rebuild every affected site.
And off. Whoa! Where are we? So now that we can share code between the sites in our company, it would be great if we could share content too. So bringing up their next wish list, we have the content wish list. So this behaves. On the main corporate website, we want to rehost some of the featured news articles from each division. Plus, for every division's website, we want to list the news articles from every other division. With this level of interconnection between sites, a typical approach would force us to move the source of truth for our content out of our sites and into some central data lake. But we don't want our team to have to edit a data lake directly. We want them to edit their site in context. To achieve that, we're going to show how flat lake and site mounting work together to create a static Git-based data lake, with no mental overhead or change in workflow for the editors in our company. You could picture building this with something like site mounting on its own, but the burden of every site needing to mount every other site and understand all of its source files means this approach doesn't scale beyond a few sites. So what we're going to do is use Flatlake to aggregate all of our content into a static API of sorts and give every website access to this data at build time. Importantly, we're going to keep the content authoring experience for each team grounded in their website, not in some giant database. Flatlake is driven by a single configuration file and runs as a standalone command. As such, our data lake repo is super simple, with just Flatlake's config file and a build script. Looking inside a slimmed down configuration file, we see the extent of Flatlake's setup. We define a news collection, give it a set of inputs, one for each division's news folder. We merge in some data to each input so we can filter by division. And I accidentally clicked on the wrong thing. Where were we? There we are. And there we go. And we tell Flatlake that we want both the front matter data and the markdown content to be part of the same API. You'll notice this repo doesn't contain the content it's referencing. How you achieve that depends on your environment. Locally, I tend to use symbolic links or Git submodules can be good. For this talk, though, we're going back to our good friend site mounting. In CloudCannon, we just mount the source files from each of our division sites into the data lake and hit build. Behind the scenes, Flatlake now pulls all of the markdown content files and their front matter from our division sites and builds them up into what I've been calling a static API. If we look at Flatlake's output directory, we can see a bunch of folders containing JSON files. There are files that list every item in a given collection or globally, and there are files that aggregate this content on certain data. For example, highlighted as a file that lists every news post that was written by David Medium. Within it, we see the JSON representation of the content from Eleventy that Flatlake ingested. The structure of these files allows you to host them as a live API with pagination and individual endpoints, or since this is a flat folder full of files, we can load it into our Eleventy site as data, which we'll do for our real big company. So far, we've been site mounting source files from one site to another, which anyone can do on CloudCannon. To use our content lake as site data, we want to mount the output files. In Flatlake's case, this means that we can mount the data files it generated into all of Realbig's Eleventy sites. Mounting build output files is a feature of our higher tier plans, and it unlocks quite a lot of options for larger teams. With the static JSON files on disk, it's now trivial to pull in and use this data in Eleventy. For example, on the main website, here is where we pull in one of Flatlake's files as computed data ready to be used in your templating. And since this all glues together with site mounting, you don't need to manually trigger any builds. When one of our divisions writes a new article, it triggers Flatlake to rebuild its API, and a change in that API triggers every site that consumes it to rebuild with the latest aggregated content automatically. And a great feature of the syndication is that it works in seamlessly with your Git workflows. Content only syndicates when it lands on a main branch, and each site can have as many feature branches or staging environments as they need without leaking content. No need to fork one giant data lake or maintain versioned content within it. With all of that in place, plus a bit more liquid templating behind the scenes, we now have RealBig's content syndicated and shown across all of RealBig's web properties. On the main corporate website, you can now list and read all featured news articles from the divisions. And we made the related articles section of each division's website list the latest news from all other divisions as well.
It's worth pointing out here that all of this dev work only happens once behind the scenes. So for a team of editors, the website users, and perhaps the non-technical content folk, all they need to do is navigate to the site that they're working on, choose the content type that they're creating or editing, and just get to work. They have their layouts and their components already, and once published, their content will be syndicated to the parent site as well as to any other sites that mount the data lake. It's also important to remember that editors don't need to wade through that data lake just to find the content for their site. They get to edit in situ in an environment just for them. And that kind of sums up how a real big company can build real good static websites with a great tool like Eleventy. Can share layouts across any number of sites, can aggregate, can syndicate their content, and can keep everything portable with Git-based CMS. And that means, as I said before, no vendor locking. So you always control your content as we think you should. If you'd like to try any of this out for yourself, please have a look at cloudcannon.com. As Zach and Mike mentioned earlier, we have a draw for a free migration to CloudCannon and a bunch of discounted plans over at cloudcannon.com/11tconf. This offer is only open during the conference, so you have a couple of hours to enter still. If you do miss out on those, you can still test out site mounting with a free trial and one of our included starters or sites templates. As of yesterday, we have a new template we've just added for universities and colleges who I think are quite likely to find site mounting in Flatlake a really handy solution to manage that standard several hundred sites. You can also check out Flatlake at flatlake.app, and please raise any issues or discussions on GitHub. And finally, do feel free to take a look at realbig.company to see our connected sites in action, read that content that was so much fun to write, and also check out the files for realbig.company on GitHub if you'd like to dig through the source there. Now, we're happy to answer any questions in chat after the talk or on Mastodon if you prefer. Thanks very much.